Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and this is my wrap-up for May. As always, I will begin with 3 brief shout-outs to small booktubers that I have been enjoying lately. The first channel I want to mention is Emily's Reading Adventure. Emily does really relaxed, chatty kind of videos that are kind of calming to watch, while at the same time talking about books in a really interesting way. Her content is the usual mix of tags, reviews, wrap-ups, just all the things that we all love about booktube, and she does them really well. Second small booktuber I want to mention is Chalisa from Books and Chili. She's absolutely hilarious. Her content is mostly about YA at the moment. She's also quite a bit younger than I am. But she recently did a video about how her reading tastes are changing, and that's really interesting. And the last small booktuber I want to mention is Kate Hickey. She recently did a really amazing reading vlog where she read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. In general, she reads quite widely and is always very well spoken about her books. So all 3 of these booktubers will be linked in the description. Please go and check them out. Now we get into the actual wrap-up part. I felt like May hasn't been a good month, but looking at my reading statistics, I managed to read 5 books, which is perfectly fine. In fact, I think that's more books than I read in, what's before May? In April. That's it. Across those 5 books, I gave an average rating of 4.2 stars. So again, that's really very high. One of those books was a reread, which I knew was going to get 5 stars, but there was also one new book that I gave 5 stars to, so let's get into that straight away. The first book I finished in May was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This is the story of 30-year-old Eleanor who works in an office during the week and then gets drunk on vodka on her own at the weekend. Minerva? You okay? You alright, Minerves? She very clearly is not completely fine, but the book actually starts off with this rom-com type setup of a socially awkward woman falling head over heels for an unattainable guy and then trying to win him over. If that sounds like the plot of Bridget Jones, it's because it is. But the book takes all of the tropes and archetypes of what we might call the women's fiction genre, and it completely turns them upside down until you're left with a story that's so gripping and heartbreaking and deep, it really sucks you in. I inhaled this book over 2 days and I did give it 5 stars. Highly, highly recommended. Especially if you're a man watching this. I've only really heard women talk about this book on BookTube, probably because the cover design, the title, it's all very women targeted. Anyone should read this, because it's a fantastically written book. So this was my 5-star read, and clearly the month got off to a very good start. By the way, if the camera angles suddenly changed just now, that's because I just got a phone call, and that is one of the downsides of filming on your phone. Anyway, next I read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Obviously this was a reread, but my first time reading the Jim Kay Illustrated Edition. I got this for Christmas last year. I don't really need to say much about this. It's one of my favourite Harry Potters. The illustrations are beautiful, but there aren't as many of them as there were in the first 2 Jim Kay versions. 5 stars. Not much else to say, really. The next book I read was I Let You Go by Clare Mackintosh. This is a psychological crime thriller done really well. In this, we followed 2 people whose lives have been shaken up by a hit-and-run accident. There's Jenna escaping her life in England in order to move to a tiny cottage on the South Welsh coast. And there's Ray, who is the detective investigating the hit-and-run case. This is a really thrilling story with one twist after another, some of which I guessed, but most of which I didn't get. This kind of tense crime action is blended really beautifully with the calming but creepy beauty of the Welsh rural setting. This has got action, but it also has quiet bits. There are some really well-written characters and some beautiful descriptions of the Welsh countryside. It's a really engrossing read, and I recommend it for anyone looking for a really good thriller. I gave this book 4 stars. The next book I read was this one here. called Die Katze, die kam zu bleiben by Nils Uddenberg. This book is originally in Swedish and the English translated title is The Old Man and the Cat. This is the non-fiction account of a retired Swedish psychology professor who one day finds that a cat has moved into his garden. And he tells the story of how he and his wife ended up adopting this cat. The entire book is basically just about his life with this cat, you know, their daily lives, their routines, funny things that the cat does. It's a very cute book, and anyone who has ever lived with cats will recognize the stories immediately because so much of it is exactly the same as what I experienced with my cats. It's a nice little story about the relationship between humans and felines, but there isn't much more to the book than that. That is why I only gave it 3 stars. I think cat lovers will get something out of it, but if you're not into cats at all, then really don't bother with it because you will just find it very boring. And the last book I read this month was The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. This was my desperate pick for please get me out of this reading slump book, which I picked on your recommendations in the comments of one of my previous videos where I talk about that. And it's a science fiction classic from 1951 about a world in which a poisonous but easily tamed walking flesh-eating plant has spread throughout the world. This is fine, but one day after a particularly spectacular meteor shower, the world wakes up and has suddenly gone blind. And suddenly these harmless little plants, the Triffids, have the advantage over humans, both the blind and the seeing ones. The survivors have to now fight not just against the plants, but also fight for their place in a world where the infrastructure is quickly deteriorating. The main character is a young Triffid biologist called Bill, who is one of the few that don't go blind after the meteor shower. He teams up with a young woman called Gisela, whose claim to fame is her scandalous book about sex that she wrote. And together they try and survive in a London that is becoming more and more wild. I love dystopian settings like that, where the world is only just beginning to end. So this was right up my street. It's also very clearly from the 1950s. And like any good dystopian novel, it explores the fears and issues of its time. In this case, this includes the Russians, nuclear weapons, the interference of the USA in UK politics, and second wave feminism, which is only just emerging. This did not bother me at all while reading it, especially the last point. I think that's partly because the book features some really great female character, especially Gisela. I think she's an amazing character. This was not the sort of misogynistic feast I was expecting when I started it, and that was a nice surprise. But there are still some problematic opinions in it, of course. I mean, 1951. Overall, this was a really fun read. It was beautifully written prose and an interesting world to read about, and I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it for pretty much anyone who wants to give a classic sci-fi book a go. This was all the books I read in May, so now on to my curated bookshelf project, in which I try and reduce the amount of books that I have. Out of the 5 books that I read, 2 were borrowed, so they have been returned to their owners. One, which was my 3-star read, I am giving away, although I am giving it away to my husband, so it's going to stay in the house at least until he's finished it, and then it'll probably get donated. And the other one, which is the John Wyndham book, I will keep because I enjoyed that and I think I'm going to reread it. Finally, there's my single non-book favourite, and this month it's the tripod that this phone is on. Let's see if I can show you that. And there it is. Isn't it pretty? I think I paid £15 for this on Amazon. Either way, I will link the item in the description box. But it's been really good having a tripod. It means that the phone is slightly less wobbly when the cats jump around on the desk. It's still wobbly because the desk itself is wobbly, but it's an improvement. I hope you had a good month in May, both in terms of reading and otherwise. And until next time, thank you for watching. Bye.